Now I want us to look at something that's so very important, particularly in Baptist life, but in all evangelical life in America. We have developed a God who has the power to justify men, who fulfills all His promises in justifying the believing. But He is no longer a God who also has power to sanctify those He justifies. You see, He is giving a promise here about salvation. This salvation I have promised you, I will complete every word of it. But in America today, we have all kinds of people who are supposedly saved. God has the power to justify them, to free them from sin. But these very people never grow in grace. They never grow in sanctification. They're never transformed. They always remain the same, carnal and worldly, and they fill up our churches. They make up the majority of people in the churches. God has the power to save, but He does not have the power to save completely. And that is totally foreign to everything the Bible teaches on salvation. Salvation is a past tense event in the fact that He has justified His people. But it is a present tense event in the fact that all those whom He justifies, He sanctifies. As a matter of fact, in the Scriptures, in true historical Baptist teaching, and in almost all true evangelical denominations, God's work of sanctification is the evidence that He's truly justified a man. There is no such thing as a continuously carnal Christian. It is not in the Bible. It is not in church history. It is a fabrication of American Christianity. And of course we have to have it because it's the only way we can explain that the great majority of most of our churches are carnal and worldly. Look what he says in verse 12. You will go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills will break forth into shouts of joy before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Instead of the thorn bush, the cypress will come up. Instead of the nettle, the myrtle will come up. And it will be a memorial to the Lord for an everlasting sign which will not be cut off. What he's saying is, through this work of salvation, I am going to reverse the curse. Now, this is not just talking about some future time. It's not just talking about some millennium. It is talking about also His work of salvation in the life of a believer. That when God does a work of salvation, it is not only going to produce a position before God, a position of righteousness and acceptance, but in this life, He is going to change them, make them His people. He's going to transform them with life and joy and righteousness and holiness. They are going to change. And why is that? And it will be a memorial to the Lord. Here's what I want you to understand. The work of salvation has God's reputation riding on it. The work of salvation has God's reputation riding on it. Now, what do I mean by that? Do you remember the people of Israel committing terrible idolatry? And God tests Moses. He basically says, Moses, get out of the way. I'm going to kill them all. And make a people out of you. And Moses intercedes. Now, many people say, can you believe it? The entire fate of the nation of Israel was in Moses' hands at that moment. Yes, that's true, but Moses was in God's hands at the same time. But He was testing Moses and proving a point and giving a wonderful, wonderful demonstration of His providence. He says, get away, Moses, I'll kill them all and I'll make a people out of you. And Moses says, no, Lord. And this is his argument. The Egyptians, your enemies, will say that although you were strong enough to bring them out of Egypt, you were not strong enough nor faithful enough to bring them into their own land. You go to Ezekiel 36. He says, I am going to save you for my own name's sake. And when I save you, the nations may not bless the work, but they'll recognize it and they'll know that I am God. You see, His reputation is riding upon it. And that is why when we have this doctrine that says God can partially save a man and cannot sanctify him because the man won't cooperate and cannot bring him into greater godliness and greater holiness and greater piety, what are we doing? We're trampling on the reputation of God. Salvation is a supernatural work